Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you guys all so much for coming out here tonight. I know it's kind of been windy and wet today, so I'm really happy to see this kind of turnout for this meeting and because of the important topic that we're talking about tonight. And thank you to everybody who is joining us online as well for tuning in and taking part in this meeting. We like to start every meeting at City Utilities with a safety share because safety is the number one thing that we think about around here. So just a couple of items to think about. This time of year, I always think about holiday decorating, and I like to see the holiday lights. Like to see you use efficient LED lights, but we also want to make sure when you're putting your lights up, you do it safely. So make sure you don't put your ladders on an area that's not level or sound, and you have somebody spotting you and helping you do that. And if there are certain places that it's just too dangerous to get to, let's make sure we don't do that and we all stay safe and we can enjoy the holidays together. And then the second share I always like to do this time of the year is from a cybersecurity standpoint. We're all probably doing a little bit of online shopping and doing everything that we do to get ready for the holidays. And there's a lot of opportunities to give your personal information out, whether it's online or in stores. So please be careful of protecting your personal information, your credit cards, that sort of stuff this holiday season. So just please keep those things in mind. Got a good program for you tonight. You know, globally, energy availability is a topic that we're all concerned about. And if you look across the pond over to Europe and you see what they're facing and the affordability piece and the high energy prices that they're seeing because of the lack of availability of energy, that's a huge concern. That's even translating back to the United States for what we're seeing in high natural gas prices. So we're all connected, and it's really important that we all work through this together. It also really, when you think back into 2021 and Winter Storm Uri and what we saw here in the Midwest, it really reinforced to me the importance of long-term planning and that make sure that we're planning, because we all saw, not so much here in Springfield, but especially down in Texas, the lack of energy, how important that is to our daily lives and making sure, just from a safety standpoint, but to make sure that we can also do what we need to do in our daily lives. So that's hugely important. We have to keep all those things in mind as we try to balance that three-legged stool of sustainability, reliability, and affordability. But the thing I like about living here in Springfield and having a municipally owned utility is that we get to have those conversations and we get to figure out our future together in meetings like this versus having somebody in a boardroom 1,000 miles away make those decisions for us. So your input here tonight is very important to us. We've been working on our integrated resource plan for about a year now. When we kicked this process off, we had a few public input meetings back in the spring, and we've done much of the modeling work and the technical work over the summertime and have put a plan together that you're going to hear a little bit about tonight. But as we do that, we want your input on that integrated resource plan, and that IRP is something, as we do our energy future planning, is so important. One thing that we know for sure is that the assumptions that we made back in March and April have probably changed somewhat, but when you start doing your modeling, you have to have a snapshot in time. And that's why we're committed to making sure we do these integrated resource plans, but every 3 to 5 years, so that we can make sure we're keeping up to date and making sure we're making the right decisions for everybody in our community. The way it's going to work tonight, Chris Jones, our Vice President, Chief Electric Operations Officer, is going to do a presentation on kind of the plan and the results of the planning so far with integrated resource plan. And then we're going to open up to comments and questions here and also online. So if you have a comment or a question, when it comes to your turn, we're going to ask you to come up to the microphone, and based on the crowd here, we're going to try to limit it to 3 minutes for your questions or comments. If you are here as a group and you all have the same comment or question, you might want to think about having a spokesperson pass that comment along, but definitely everyone is here, should feel free, and we want to hear from everybody. So feel free to come up and make a comment or ask a question. We do have the opportunity to comment written online. So for the next 30 days, it'll be open. We'll be taking comments, and you can send your comments to City Utilities at irp@cityutilities.net, and Chris will have that up on the screen when he gets here as well. So just again, I'm really appreciative of all of you guys coming out here tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris Jones.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Let's see here. Uh-oh. There we go. Now we're working. Okay, Gary covered most of this agenda. Obviously, he welcomed everyone. I'm going to cover the resource plan overview. We will have opportunity for question and answer, and we have staff here to help answer questions in addition to myself. And as Gary mentioned, if you have comments, please limit those to 3 minutes. And if you have written comments, you can email those to irp@cityutilities.net. We have some paper copies of the agenda as well, if you'd like paper copy. We talked a little bit about the timeline. This is the timeline of our IRP process. It started about a year ago, putting together the team, starting to think about the assumptions. We had a couple of public meetings to talk about what resources we would consider in the future, what resources we have today, what purchase power agreements we have when they expire, what our demand looks like, other things that might influence our plan over time. We developed a base case. The base case is really the most likely case we think at that point in time that will occur in the future over 20 years. It's a guess, but it's an educated guess. And as Gary said, it's a snapshot in time. So as you do these, as soon as you do these, you find out other information that makes it change. But that's why we repeat these on a somewhat regular basis. As Gary mentioned, we did the analysis over the summer, and then we presented the draft results to our board in October, the Citizens Advisory Council in November, and then we're having this public meeting today to talk about the results as well. I want to introduce the team that put this together. On the city utilities side, Jeff Noddick, who's our Director of System Planning and Compliance. Amy Newton, who is here tonight, is one of our resource planners. Kenny Hale is also a resource planner. Brandy Collier wears a lot of hats, but he was kind of a financial analyst in this particular role in this project. And then from the Energy Authority, we have Greg Labby, Brandon Williams, Tyler Wolford, Jim Myers, and Jonathan Mead. The Energy Authority has partnered with us on the last 3 integrated resource plans, so 2016, 19, and 2022. They do the analytics, they do the study piece. We help them in terms of checking it for reasonableness, providing them the assumptions and the inputs, and they do the heavy lifting. So we'll jump right into it. This is the biggest change, the most notable change, and probably the reason why many of you are here tonight. The plan recommends delaying the retirement of our JTEC Unit 1 from 2027 to 2030. And there are a number of reasons why we've made that decision per the plan. We proposed that per the plan. And some of them are related to the Winter Storm Uri event. Some of them are related to some uncertainty with SPP in terms of their interconnection backlog, and then also some supply chain issues with solar, which is the most significant replacement resource for that unit. And we'll talk about each of those in a little more detail. The same as the previous plan in 2019, the base case does not recommend any additional thermal resources. So wind, solar, battery type resources in the future is what's recommended. Okay, so the first planning challenge is this capacity planning. As a result of the Winter Storm Uri events, SPP, Southwest Power Pool, which is a regional transmission organization in the Midwest that we're a member of, made it clear that they would not be like ERCOT, which plays a similar role in Texas, that if we have another event 10 years down the road, people will say, gosh, they had one 10 years ago and they didn't do anything. SPP is committed to taking action. So they've really done 2 things. They've changed the capacity requirement above what our peak demand is, our reserve requirement. So if our peak demand is here, we have to meet that plus a little bit extra, some buffer. They've increased that. At the same time, the resources that we have are wind resources primarily, but renewable resources plus thermal resources. They've reduced the value in terms of capacity that you need to achieve that. So what we need to achieve has gone up. The units that we have to achieve that with have been reduced. So that presents a challenge not only for us but for all utilities within the footprint. So They've also changed them dramatically from summer to winter. So summertime used to be the biggest concern. This event occurred in the winter. So now there's a big emphasis on the winter time. And you can see that our winter reserve requirement used to be 60 megawatts. It's now going to 143, and it could go higher than that. We are a peak demand 800 megawatt utility, so that's a pretty significant change from 12% to 29%. You can see that we assumed in the last plan that we would get 40% capacity from solar, and now it's down to about 18%. So that's a pretty significant reduction. In terms of our conventional resources, we expect about a 6% reduction. Those reductions will come in future years. So these are all things that make the capacity planning more challenging for us and make our current JTEC 1 coal unit more valuable, trying to provide that wintertime capacity. Other planning challenges we have are related to congestion. Congestion is a little bit complicated to explain, but essentially, if you looked at the average price of energy across the SPP footprint, we're paying a premium, which means two things. One, we need more transmission built into Southwest Missouri, especially into Springfield. And two, without that, because that's a long game, and we're working on that all the time, but it's not easy to accomplish. The second thing is it makes local generation more valuable. It acts as a price hedge if we can have local generation. So you'll see that the first recommended generation, which is going to be solar, is recommended to be locally. It eliminates price risk with remote resources. Other planning generations, we now have some emission reduction goals. The local generation requirement, which as we went through this, we talked about it as a team that we want to maintain at least 50% local generation. There's conversations that maybe it should be more than 50%. What are the impacts of electric vehicles? We know there's going to be impacts. We don't know exactly when. We'll talk about those. Demand response is going to lower our load. So we have some programs, we have some recommendations on that. How do those offset each other? Renewable prices have increased, especially with solar in the near term. And then we had some changes to our import limit capacity. So this is new. This is an IRP goal that we have not had in the past, and that is to reduce our carbon dioxide, CO2, by 70% over 2005 levels by 2035, with a further goal of net zero carbon by 2050. This is in the plan. It's also in our strategic plan, the net zero carbon piece. We had to identify some intermediate goals. You can see in 2020, we were around 48%. So we feel like we're moving in the right direction, but we still have some work to do. The other goal there is that 50% of CU's peak load as local generation. Our load forecast methodology, I won't get into great detail on this. It's a 50-50 forecast, which means our forecast 50% of the time will be, our load 50% of the time will be above the forecast, and 50% of the time will be below the forecast. You can see there's lots of inputs into this and some economic models, and we weather normalize all of the data. This is what our load forecast looks like. It's slightly increasing over the out years. So we see with the continued economic development that we have in Southwest Missouri, especially within our service territory in Springfield, also with EV potential, we see our load growing over time, although not as rapidly as we've seen in past years if you go back prior to where this graph is at. Our load has actually been very flat due to energy efficiency over the last several years in general. Electric vehicles are tricky. We know they're coming. We don't know exactly when. So we spent quite a bit of time, a lot of time, trying to drill down on data in the Midwest, data in Missouri, data for Springfield, Missouri, and we think we have a pretty good forecast. This is one item that we believe when we do this process again in 3 years, we'll have better data. Right now, we're projecting early on, we're going to see quite a bit of peak load during what I would call, what do we call it, peak hours, and less during off-peak hours. But as we get different rate structures in place that encourage off-hours charging, non-peak hour charging, we'll see that start to shift. We did a demand response potential study recently and identified 5 programs. These are the 5 programs. And it was a list of, gosh, it was a big list, probably 20, 30 different programs that could be selected. This consultant conducted surveys, looked at our community, looked at data, looked at other communities, and said these 5 programs, time of use rate structure, smart thermostats, interruptible, peak time rebates, and EV smart chargers would be the best fit for Southwest Missouri. There are lots of other ones they said. You could spend money on those, but the payback is not going to be there. So we'll be moving forward with these. Time of use rate structure, we're working on that. Expect to bring that next year. Smart thermostats and possibly EV smart chargers we would like to do next year. Definitely smart thermostats. We don't have as many EVs in Springfield yet, so the smart charger could probably lag that a little. We already have an interruptible rate. We might want to tweak that a little bit. And then probably the last one we would work on would be peak time rebates, but that would be another rate option that we'd be working towards. We were very conservative in this study on how much we would reduce demand based upon these programs because we don't have a lot of experience with them. And we wanted to somewhat under-promise and over-deliver. So if we project that we could save 25 megawatts with these programs and we actually save 50, well, that's great. That's 25 additional megawatts we don't have to replace. All these programs are allowed, it says begin in 2025. That was in the model. We'll actually begin some of these programs prior to 2025. It may be 2025 before we get the rate pieces in place. That's a longer process. This is our fuel price forecast, coal and natural gas. And as Gary mentioned, natural gas has been very volatile. It was typically in the summertime, we see gas prices come down. They actually went up. They were $7, $8, $9 a decatherm, which was very uncharacteristic, but really pressure from different places. The high cost of gas in Europe, it's been as high as $50 a decatherm there. So the ability to export that and still make money drove up demand in the summertime. But we see gas prices and we see coal prices increasing, gas prices coming down in a couple of years, over the next couple of years, and then increasing over time, coal prices increasing over time as well. We have a kind of a base case and then a high case there for both fuels. This is our projections for supply resources. The top line, the blue line, is battery storage. We see it decreasing the most, although it still remains a more expensive resource than solar and wind. We have a combination of local solar and non-local solar and then non-local wind. We see the effects of the supply chain. We're anticipating the effects of the supply chain and some of the other tariff-related issues to ease in the next few years and the prices to return, hopefully to a similar place prior to COVID. So we get to the base case solutions. Again, the base case is the case that we think is most likely to occur in the future. And so in the next 5 years, and really it's in the next 4 years, because we're almost to 2023. We started this in 2022, but it takes about a year to get one of these done. We're going to prepare for that higher planning reserve margin in the summer and winter. Some of these reserve margins are phased in over time. Some of them are already in place. So we're going to have to continue to monitor that and make sure we're ready for that. We are going to have to find some fairly large tracts of land for local solar. Solar takes about 8 acres per megawatt. We're looking at 150 megawatts. It's about 1,200 acres. So that's going to be, and when I say local, it's really regional. It needs to be connected to our transmission system. So we have some transmission that runs outside of the city limits and even outside of Greene County. But it needs to be fairly close to Springfield. So we need to begin work on that. We are going to launch some demand response programs, and then this says, and this is one of those items that got a little dated on us, prepare RFP for solar. Of course, this was put together prior to the Inflation Reduction Act. So we are weighing purchase power versus actually owning solar. It appears it's probably going to be in our best interest to own solar, which will be different for us. But we're still looking at that closely. Year 6 through 10, we're going to have some bilateral capacity that we'll purchase to replace the roughly 15 megawatts of capacity we get from Smoky Hills. Smoky Hills is a 50 megawatt wind farm. It's the most expensive wind resource we have, triple the cost of our other wind resources. So we'll let that one expire and replace that with something lower cost, hopefully. Then we have the retirement of JTEC 1. And the replacement there is essentially 150 megawatts of solar plus 50 megawatts of battery storage. And then we also are going to have to dual fuel our McCartney generators to meet that wintertime capacity requirement. Getting a little further out, years 11 through 15, we see the retirement of the JTEC combustion turbines, and those are replaced with 200 megawatts of solar, which could be local or non-local. And then in the final 5-year window, year 16 through 20, we see the retirement of James River CTs, replacement with primarily battery storage, and then a little bit of solar. We also see the expiration of the purchase power agreements for Frontier and Diamond Vista. Now, it is quite possible when we get closer to that date out in 2039, those prices are very favorable today. We might choose to extend that if that was offered, but we're so far away from that, we haven't made that decision yet. But if we don't, we'll have some solar, we'll have some battery storage, or a combination thereof. Some other long-term scenarios that we took a look at. What if gas prices are higher than we've projected? What if we have higher load? What if the EV load is more than we've projected? What if there's a federal carbon future where carbon is constrained and we have to move more quickly? What if we have higher coal prices than we've projected? What does that do? What if our thermal units are less reliable than they've been historically, and we take a bigger hit on this UCAP, which basically your capacity is determined by your reliability? What if we have a new load that's 150 megawatts? We get inquiries, I wouldn't say on a regular basis, but somewhat frequently, of data centers that want to move to town. And, can you provide 100 megawatts, 150 megawatts? What would that look like? And then what if we achieve the 70% renewable goal in concert with our 70% reduction by 2035? How does that look different? And then a few alternate base cases that we looked at as well. What if we build a combustion turbine in 2030 in place of battery storage? Or what if we build reciprocating engines in place of battery storage? There's a combination of 3 or a combination of 2. So we looked at all of those cases, and this is probably a little bit difficult to see. This is the base case here. The cost is $1.498 billion over the 20-year period. You can see the build a CT in 2030 is $1.503 billion, slightly higher. And all of these costs are higher, with the exception of the federal carbon future, where there is an assumption that would be heavily subsidized by the federal government. That if we're going to move to a highly reduced carbon future, there's going to have to be federal incentives beyond what's there today. So that's why that number is a little bit lower. If there's not those federal incentives, then that number is probably going to be off the chart, but that's why it's a little bit lower. So our base case is our lowest cost alternative of all the scenarios that we looked at in this analysis. So there we go. This is my last slide, and then we'll open it up for questions. So you can see from 2022 through 2041, which is the study period, we'll transition from essentially 2/3 of our resources being thermal, coal and gas, to 1/3, 33%. It basically swaps. So we go from 2/3 thermal to 1/3. And this is nameplate. This is not the energy that we deliver to our customers. It's the nameplate of all the resources that we own. We'll transition to, in this plan, this draft plan, 33% thermal and about 67% non-carbon. So that is the end of the formal presentation. Let's go back up here. And Brent and Kara, are you guys going to help moderate some questions? Oh, pie charts. Yeah. We can run down to the last slide. Oh, one, two, that one? We'll just leave it on that one.
When we are going to have questions, if you do have them, please come up to the microphone at the center and ask your question there so that everybody online can hear as well.
Don't be shy. Once the first person goes, then everyone else is ready. So thank you for being the first question asker.
I'm curious of how you're calculating these peak loads, especially the variance. And when you stated that, you underquote to over deliver, what does that mean? Are you able to calculate those accurately? And what's the most resilient way to prepare for all the extreme variance that you were speaking of?
Okay. So our peak demand is calculated, and Amy is here, and she can probably explain this better than I can. But it's based off our historical demand. So you take our historical peak demand and you apply some weather normalization. If it's a cooler summer than normal, then you would expect less demand. If it's a much hotter summer than normal, you would expect higher demand. And then you factor in a combination of programs that are going to reduce load and programs that are going to increase load. Those are estimates, but we get pretty close. That's why that planning reserve margin that was 12%, it's now 15% in the summertime. That's really what that's for. So if we miss it, there's margin. Everyone in the footprint has margin. In terms of under promise and over deliver, that's really related to the demand response program. So the smart thermostats, the smart EV chargers, time of use rates, those 5 programs, we don't have any experience with those. So the savings we estimated low, and we know we can achieve those savings for sure. We think we can achieve more than those savings. So that's the over deliver piece. And that's over a period of years. Because you have to build these programs out. They're all customer programs. Customers will have to enroll in time of use rates. Customers will have to enroll in smart thermostat programs. So that takes time to communicate the rate, communicate the program, develop some incentives. So that's the over deliver piece that we're looking for. Rather than say, we know we can save 50 megawatts, and then we don't quite meet the target. Did I answer your questions? Okay.
I just want to speak on behalf of my support for the things that you are doing. My name is Vicki Pratt, and my job is economic development for the region. So I deal with lots of different co-ops as well as city utilities. But from an economic development standpoint, businesses want to know that the power that they're going to need is reliable, it's consistent, and it's priced at a point that makes their operations profitable in some way. And we've never ever had a problem when it's a city utilities project. So just want to thank you for the work that you are doing, and I'm impressed by where you're going forward with this. This is good stuff. So it's just a comment. I'm not going to question anything. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, hi, want to say thanks for the great presentation and all that you guys do. I know it's hard to argue with success, but I might quibble just a tad. The metric of 8 acres per megawatt is a little old fashioned. We're finding 5 to 6 is a little more realistic nowadays with,
That would be awesome, yeah.
right? So just to introduce myself, my name is Tom Childs. I work for a St. Louis-based utility scale solar developer called Azimuth. And we deal mainly in MISO territory,
Okay.
Missouri and Illinois. And we tend to go where we feel welcome or invited, right, by the regulatory structure. And we're pretty much absent from the SPP footprint for the reasons you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. The 7-year-long queue is quite problematic. We don't have that kind of patience. So it would be great to work locally for me personally, since I'm from here and live here. I would love to not travel as much for my job. Currently, I'm driving out to the far reaches of Illinois, talking with farmers, landowners. But if we could find a way to develop more locally, I personally would be thrilled that my kids would see a little bit more of me. And I did just want to bring up a technical point. The 7-year queue, I think, deserves a little unpacking, perhaps at a different time. We believe there's some aspect of the fine print of that, some grandfathered in interconnection points that do get a sort of a pass or an expedited review process that I think are worth exploring if you were wanting to be more aggressive on your time frame for rolling out solar.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with everything you said. Yeah, the SPP interconnection queue is a problem. It's a problem for utilities. It's a problem for renewable developers. They are working on it. There was specific teams to try to improve that, consolidate some of the studies. We haven't fully seen the fruits of that labor yet. And yes, if you can take a existing interconnection and repurpose it, if you will, there is an expedited process, and we're looking at that as well. The challenge is we have limited land around that existing interconnection.
Yep, that's the big, like Mark Twain said, they don't make any more of it.
Yeah.
It's a problem. But maybe I'll give you my business card after the.
That'd be, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Oh, yeah, we'll take an online question real quick.
Okay, Beth Spindler asked, why should CU force customers to expensive coal when renewables are available? Last year, Springfield spent $50 million for coal, which could have been used for solar. Since alternative sources will lower costs for customers, couldn't CU's cost projections be part of the plan and renewable energy considered instead now?
Okay, yeah, so I think to kind of summarize the question, the person asking the question says renewables are cheaper. Why are we continuing to operate coal that costs more? Is that kind of the gist of it, Kara?
Just about the cost comparison of renewables versus coal.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. It's something that we look at all the time. And it's a little bit nuanced in that there's not direct apple to apple comparison. So if you think back to the slide that I showed, that if you have a 100 megawatt solar facility in the summertime, you're going to get 70 in the 70% capacity for that. In the wintertime, you're only going to get 18%. So that means you can't rely fully just on that solar. You have to have additional resources to provide that capacity and reliability piece. So that's where it gets a little confusing trying to do a cost comparison. The great thing about solar, the great thing about wind is the fuel is free, right? The sun is free, the wind is free, but it's not a dispatchable resource that you can push a button and make it run, and there's different values to that. So it's part of the energy transition. We are going to transition. Everybody's going to transition. But right now we have to balance that reliability piece with the cost piece. And quite honestly, solar right now it's not a great time to get into solar. Sorry, where's my solar friend at? The prices are a little bit high. We're going to wait a little bit and hopefully they're going to come down. And then they will be more competitive. Okay.
My question is, how do you plan on meeting your 2050 carbon goal while keeping John Tui power plant open until 2051?
So that's a good question. That's way out in the future. It's unlikely at our 2050 timeline to be net carbon zero. It's unlikely that we will be operating that coal unit in 2050. And if we were, it would only be for capacity in short amounts of time, but that's not an efficient way to run that type of plant. So it's unlikely that we would be doing that in 2050.
So can you tell us why we do not see the retirement of that in the plan?
Well, the plan only looks out 20 years, so it ends in 2041. So 2050 is beyond the scope. It's like a 30-year look. We only did a 20-year look. Yeah.
And my follow-up question is, are you investigating the IRA's energy infrastructure reinvestment program to retire your fossil units?
Yeah, the IRA is fairly new legislation. We are looking at it in lots of different ways. One of the biggest benefits is a direct pay, similar to the tax credit benefit that the investor-owned utilities would get, where we could own those. But yeah, it's a big piece of legislation. There's a lot of different parts to it. But yeah, we're very interested in taking advantage of any of those that would benefit our customers. Yeah, come on.
Well, I appreciate your presentation, and it really clarifies a lot of what I was looking at, trying to interpret.
Sure.
And I have made a statement that maybe some parts of it are not that appropriate, but I'm going to go ahead. My name is Louise Winkowski, and I'm speaking on behalf of the White River Group of the Missouri Sierra Club. And first of all, I'd like to express my appreciation to Daniel Hedrick, City Utilities Director of Environmental Affairs, for his prompt and thorough answers to my numerous questions about CU operations, data, and planning. Thank you very much. He's still in the room. He's very receptive to questions and very pleasant to work with. I had hoped to see in the IRP an aggressive plan for retiring the existing coal plants while moving forward to add more wind and solar resources to the energy portfolio in the near future. Instead, what I found was a pushback of 3 years for JTEC Unit 1 to 2030 and the continued use of JTEC Unit 2 until 2051. We know that fossil fuel emissions are what have caused the climate disruption that we've been experiencing for many years. Billions of dollars of damage to communities around the country can be attributed to flooding, wildfires, extreme heat, drought, and violent storms. Greene County experienced record-breaking heat in June and July, as well as severe drought throughout the summer and early fall, all consequences of climate change. Utility companies are in a key position to reduce those emissions by transitioning to renewables sooner rather than later. The situation of climate change is at a dangerous tipping point that will become irreversible if we don't take action now. Many of us feel the urgency and are putting our hope in city utilities to be the force of change in our community. Delays will cost customers even more money as prices go up in the future. Through the landmark Inflation Reduction Act, a once-in-a-generation opportunity, there are tax credits, loans, and reinvestment financing available to utility companies to transition to renewable energy systems. Missouri may receive up to $6.6 billion towards investments in large-scale clean energy projects, improved distribution and transmission lines, as well as storage capacity. We hope that CU takes advantage of these valuable opportunities that could dramatically enhance our clean energy portfolio in the near future. I'm pleased to see, and this may be a little bit of a repeat here, a goal of net zero emissions by 2050, but have looked at the IRP charts of the energy supplies that will be online then, and it includes JTEC 2 coal burner. That is part of the 400 megawatts of existing thermal sources at that time. I think you've already explained this discrepancy. I was asking if you would. And I do see that the addition of a lot of solar and battery storage over time, but not a lot of wind, increase in wind. And can you explain the reason for that?
I can. So wind is primarily non-local, so it's remote. And there's a lot of wind in SPP. We have a lot of wind PPAs today. And the way those are structured, our customers take a lot of price risk. When there is too much wind at one time, it drives the price negative. So we have to pay for the wind energy, and then we have to pay the market to take it. If it goes too negative, they curtail the wind. So we have to pay for the wind energy, and then we have to pay the wind developer the tax credit money. So mixing in solar with the wind that we have, especially local solar, where we don't have that price volatility in remote areas, the solar is closer to our load, we think is better long-term for our customers. Now, it's possible we will have additional wind in the future, but right now we have 350 megawatts, so we want to diversify that a little bit and have some solar.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for having this meeting and taking our comments online. Appreciate it very much. And
Appreciate
always
everybody.
appreciate how quickly CU turns the lights back on after a storm.
Thank you.
Well, how you doing? My name's Seth. I've been here, I did the math, 30 some odd years I've been living here. And I always give a thanks to the guys out working on the streets, doing the stuff. They hear and you hear all of our complaints, and there's plenty. I mean, people complaining, not complaints. Let's get that straight. And a nice thank you is always well appreciated for the work that's being done. I did not prepare anything to say. I found out about this meeting just a little bit ago. I am somewhat upset. I was in all the meetings whenever you were planning on building the current new coal-fired power plant. And I listened to all the promises that y'all said you would do. One of those major things, because my only point, whenever I came up to speak to city utilities and to city council, is that energy, picture a bucket, and an old rusty bucket with a lot of holes in the bottom of it is what I feel like we're at. And that water being poured out of that bucket is our energy. And what we need to look to do is not keep looking at more places to pour water into the bucket, which is where we're getting our energy from, but ways to plug those holes. That was my pretty simple analogy of what I felt was the right thing to do. And here we are, what is it, 15, 17 years later. You had a big scary graph that you put up in the Springfield News Leader. And I showed it to my son, and he was in elementary school at the time. He spoke as well, by the way. And I took that graph and I extrapolated it for my son's projected living age to about 70 years from now. At that point, I looked for it, by the way. It's disintegrated. It was paper. But it was something like 17 or 18 coal-fired power plants that we were going to need on that projected growth in my son's lifetime. And I was like, so I think we need to look at conservation. Stop just pouring energy into this bucket that's full of holes. And that's something that I'm not seeing being done. I see little bits of the rebates for this, that, the other. And I know that we live in a free country where we're allowed to make decisions. And we can't make people turn their lights off, put a sweater on inside their house, and do that sort of thing. But I was up in Columbia about 15 years ago, and they had the things that you were speaking of turning off air conditioners and rotating it through, and there's quite a few things that we can do. So basically, that's just kind of my comment of where I'd like to see us go, because we can't just keep putting more energy into it, or time into me rambling up here. I guess my question would then be, with keeping important things like our hospitals on and the businesses that we need to make money, where is human health factored into these equations? Our air quality is not getting any better. And our water quality, with all the coal ash that we've had a hard time finding places to dispose of, that coal ash is going into our drinking water. And these are things that need to be factored in the health of the community. Where are those numbers being factored in? And I think we know the answer, they're not.
So yeah, the health of our community is super important, obviously. And I think what separates us from maybe some other utilities is the resources that we own are located in the community that we live in. So yeah, we're very concerned about air quality. We're very concerned about water quality. We operate the water utility. So yeah, that's very important to us, and we live near these facilities. So it's not directly factored in there, but I think it certainly is a consideration that we make. And I would say that we have a very robust groundwater monitoring system for our landfill, and I don't think there's any detection of coal ash seeping into the groundwater. And Daniel, where'd Daniel go? Daniel's our expert in that regard. But yeah, we work very closely with Missouri DNR on that. So we feel very comfortable. And like I said, it's because we live in the community that these assets are in. They're not in a remote area where we're like, we don't care about that. We don't live around that. So, our CEO lives 2 miles from the power plant. So it's definitely close to him.
And one thing you touched on at the beginning is the efforts from an energy efficiency perspective.
Yes.
And if you look at this company and this community compared to many of the others, we're pretty far in advanced in a lot of the things we do. If you see in the report here, the demand response efforts that are there, that is that next level. It's not just energy efficiency, it's actually partnering with customers in a way to help us all move to that future that you're talking about. So I actually think the alignment is there. We're all on that same page of how do we get people to be more invested in the thing that we have in Springfield is we have a community that's full of people that are interested in this. So this isn't something, I think you said the free country part.
Yeah.
We don't have to do much, but have the carrot of here's the great incentives, and there's some energy efficiency people in the room here that develop those programs. We have great success in almost every time we put one of these rebate programs out. So, and I don't want to be too curt or quick with this, but we are trying to limit to 3 minutes on that, not
Totally.
to cut you off,
That's
but
why
just
I
so that
tried
everybody
to-
else have opportunities.
No, I
But
just-
you've touched on things that we all agree with, and I think
Just gonna say-
we're heading the right path.
You're caught in between a rock and a hard place of trying to keep everybody happy and keep the lights on for us. So we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marissa Frazier. I am speaking on behalf of the Missouri Sierra Club and our more than 2,000 members and supporters in the Springfield City Utilities Service District. Today, I'm going to cover some of our concerns, and I will be submitting further technical comments in written form after this meeting.
Thank you.
Firstly, city utilities should not delay the retirement of Twitty Coal Unit 1. The Inflation Reduction Act tax credits makes renewables even more appealing alternative to the Twitty Coal Unit 1. Prematurely deciding to delay retirement could force ratepayers to pay for an expensive legacy coal unit when alternatives are available. City utilities should move forward with its retirement plans. City Utilities IRP is incomplete. It needs consideration of public health and environmental benefits. Despite the fact that burning coal to generate electricity has tremendous negative impacts on public health and the environment, CU neglected to include any environmental benefits or harms in its resource plan. Springfield residents deserve a transparent process, a look at CU's cost projections, and a chance to provide input. CU must first improve its efforts to integrate feedback from its ratepayers. Burning coal for energy results in air and water pollution. No area in Missouri remains free of impaired streams due to mercury pollution from burning coal. Even with the new technology that improves air quality, toxic heavy metals are still present in the combustion residuals known as coal ash. These heavy metals are then concentrated into the waste that goes into coal ash landfills and ponds. These disposal sites are significant sources of water pollution. Coal ash contains multiple heavy metals, including mercury, lead, and arsenic, that are known to cause damage to the nervous system, cognitive impairment, cancers, and cardiovascular disease. Children and fetuses are especially susceptible. In the Springfield area, the active coal site is at the John Twitty Energy Center in Southwest Springfield. Once that's full, CU plans to dispose of future coal ash at the James River Power Station landfill adjacent to Lake Springfield. Both landfills are located in karst topography. This makes them especially susceptible to sinkhole collapses and leakage of pollutants into the James River watershed. Okay, I'm almost done. Effective monitoring is extremely difficult due to the complicated nature of water flow through karst landscapes. CU has declined to pursue safer methods of disposal. The public health consequences are cumbersome and expensive. These consequences are all outsourced to individuals and communities. The ultimate answer to the air and water pollution produced by burning coal is for energy to move to beyond coal as soon as possible. Thank you for hosting this meeting and accepting our comments.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Matt Morrow. I'm president of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, and just want to thank you for hosting this tonight and for receiving this feedback. I also want to thank City Utilities for the progress that you've made in sustainability and use of renewables. I've been a City Utilities customer for 23 years, just not in a row. So there's been a period of time where I've lived in other communities and seen how other utilities operate. We're pretty fortunate to have a locally owned utility that's owned by the community. And I think it leads to responsiveness like what we're seeing here. I also want to comment that as we work to compete with other communities and other regions on attracting businesses and helping to retain businesses in our community that could do the work that they do anywhere, we compete on a lot of different levels. So one of the really important factors for just about every business, and there are about 1,500 member companies of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, and that represents about 100,000 employees. Most of those are City Utilities customers as well. And so, there's reliability, there's sustainability, just as you've said, and affordability. And for that balance and for that combination to work well is really what we need in order to be able to compete for economic advantages and economic investment in our community. Nobody can afford as a business to have the lights not reliable, not on, and they need to be able to afford it as well competitively. One of the other factors that really weighs in a lot recently in the last probably 10 years especially is many global companies have set their own sustainability and carbon goals, objectives. And when we're competing for business with those companies, we compete really well. And I think that's a credit to the progress that's been made here in City Utilities work and prioritization of sustainability within the balance of being reliable and affordable as well. But for those companies that have set significant, meaningful carbon goals and sustainability goals for their own business, we tend to show very well against other communities. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Pam Shaver, and I've been asked to speak on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Southwest Missouri. I'd like to start by thanking Chris Jones for all of his prompt responses to my many emails. So we really do appreciate that. The League's position on natural resources states that we support environmentally sound policies that reduce energy growth rates, emphasize energy conservation, and encourage the use of renewable resources. In order to meet these environmental goals, the League urges City Utilities to make use of the funds provided by the Inflation Recovery Act. Other Missouri utilities, such as Evergy out of Kansas City, have taken note of the opportunities presented by the IRA. Will moving away from coal-fired power plants be expensive? Yes, we will have to invest money in renewable energy. At the Denver Democracy Summit in June of 2022, Fritz Meyer, Dean of the Joseph Corbel School of International Studies, stated, responding to climate change requires that democracies persuade their publics to sacrifice for the global good for future generations and to make very hard trade-offs quickly. Experts would argue that the alternative is also expensive. Already climate-driven floods, drought, and severe storms cost consumers billions of dollars. One of the greatest concerns for the League of Women Voters is making certain democracy is the standard for all socioeconomic levels of society. Many experts believe that climate change will only exacerbate inequality. Once again, quoting Fritz Meyer from the Denver Democracy Summit, there is nothing more destabilizing in a democracy historically than gross inequality. We applaud the fact that city utilities already acquires 45% of its energy from renewable energy sources. We appreciate the goals for clean energy set by the IRP recently released by CU. However, we ask city utilities to move more aggressively away from fossil fuels and toward renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll talk fast. Thank you, Chris, so much for convening this, and I appreciate the thoroughness with you've gone over this and explained a lot of things which are not as clear from the report. A lot of people have touched on something that is very important for us, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. Mm-hmm. And, we mentioned that over and over again. It's about $91 million provision for clean energy incentives, including $275 billion of loan guarantees to secure the retirement of coal assets. And I commend you all for your aggressive movement towards clean energy. I'm curious, you mentioned before this report being dated. I saw no mention of the Inflation Reduction Act. Could you speak to how the Inflation Reduction Act and those incentives, particularly with accelerating coal retirement, affect the economics and the thinking of this? And the second part is, there is a very real legal liability of health risks from coal-fired power plant and the long-term liability of people getting sick from this. And in your care for the health of the community, do you ever think about the real financial class action risk of these toxic assets like the John Twitty coal-fired power plant and the long-term risk of running it longer?
So I think your first question was related to the Inflation Reduction Act and maybe why that doesn't show up in this plan. And it kind of came about when we were finalizing this plan. And certainly we are very interested in pursuing, as I said, anything within that will help our customers. This plan is a snapshot in time. It doesn't mean we won't look at taking action before we do another plan. We'll continue to look at the Inflation Reduction Act, how that could impact us, how that could benefit us, and we'll do that ongoing, and then it will likely impact the next plan that we produce. But we will continue to look at that as we always do. Things will change with the requirements that we have to provide. Things will change with resources. Hopefully prices will become more favorable. So yeah, we'll definitely look at that, and if there are things that are favorable to our customers, we'll take advantage of that. And we're really in the process of doing that today. In terms of operating coal plants and I think it's kind of similar to the question about the health impacts. We certainly are concerned about the health and the wellness of everyone in our community. That's very, very important to us. We operate our facilities in a way that we think is safe, that meets all the requirements that are set forth by Department of Natural Resources and EPA. We know that we're going to transition from what we have today to things different in the future, and I think we're just trying to find the best timing that makes it palatable for our customers. So yeah, we are obviously concerned about the health of our customers, because it's our customers, our family, our friends, our neighbors. Brent, do you have anything you want to add to that?
So I was actually just going to let everybody know we're running out of time. So to add to that, just from the plan that we put together here, everything that we put into the thinking of this plan starts with the safety of our community, with the affordability, with all of the things we have to do. And we started the meeting with a safety share, really is something that's a cultural thing here. And we don't just mean it from how safe our workers are day in and day out of doing their job, but how the community's safety is. So absolutely a part of the question and then what we think through. And one more question is an online question, and then we will wrap this up.
Okay, and thank you. And just so everybody knows that we will have all of the questions, comments, and responses posted to the cityutilities.net website on the IR page within 30 days. So we appreciate all that. We have received quite a few comments online and questions, and so we'll be responding to those as well. But just to follow up, probably to wrap this up, how are these public comments and your questions being incorporated into your planning?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of different ways. We're going to take all the questions and all the comments and look through those and see if there's any new information. Is there something there that someone asks and says, did you consider this? I'll get with Amy, we'll get with TEA, and we have an answer to that question, or we're going to have to go back and do a little more analysis. So that's one way they'll be incorporated. Certainly the feedback as we move forward, probably half a dozen people have commented on the Inflation Reduction Act. That will be something we will be looking at. We already are, but we'll continue to look at that over time. So that feedback has been heard. That will be incorporated immediately. And then there's probably pieces of feedback that we will get that we'll want to incorporate into our next analysis. And I say in 3 years, but really it takes a year to do it. So we'll have about 2 years, then we'll start the process again. So there'll really be multiple ways that we'll incorporate the feedback that we get tonight. Did you have one more question? Or? Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys wanting to keep on time. Everyone has schedules. I know I do. I'm sorry I was late today. I had to put dinner on the kids the table for my kids. We had 6 days notice for this. I don't know how many of you guys are aware of this. And then the online part of it was just added yesterday, changed 12 hours ago. And then I found out we weren't going to be able to actually speak with our voices, just be read. And I thought originally we could talk on the online portion, like with actually have presence and stuff like that. So rushed out of the house, got here as quick as I could. So thank you for letting me jump up here. I'll make this quick, but kind of wanted to be here in person with my voice to show you guys that this is important to me and everybody else. I'm Jillian White. I'm a city utilities customer and a concerned citizen. This integrated resource plan does not take into account environmental benefits or harms. The science is clear. We need to be doing our part to safeguard our future, and we're seeing the impacts of the climate crisis now. Worse, erratic climate and weather events, historic flooding, heat islands, and droughts are impacting the most vulnerable in our communities first and hardest. Amongst those vulnerable are the ones who can't be here tonight because they had to go virtual, and the voices that are not being heard, those with kids that are trying to look out for that, people who can't be out and about. I'm just wanting to say, to ensure a safe, affordable, and reliable energy into the future, all of our utilities, including CU, need to be moving away from fossil fuels and into renewable energy as quickly as possible. Thank you for letting me come up and say this. Thank you for letting me be here and having a voice for everybody who couldn't be here as well. So thanks.
I do want to thank you all for being here tonight and for sharing your voices. If you look at our mission statement on the wall over here, you don't see anything that says electricity, natural gas, water, transit, or broadband. It's to advance the quality of life in our community. And, I think that's what we're all talking about here tonight, and, innovation, engagement, and stewardship. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take that engagement, which is what you guys are all here tonight doing. And that's what, again, I'll reiterate what I love about being municipal utilities, because we can solve our problems with these conversations here in Springfield. It's going to take innovation, because something we talked about with health effects, we're talking about transitioning a large energy need from the transportation sector to the electric sector. And that's why you see continued growth in some of the projections that we see in here. So we're going to have to be innovative on how we do those things. And stewardship is really what we're talking about. And when I talk about stewardship, it's environmental stewardship. It's also the affordability stewardship as we talk about our customers and they're making decisions on what they're going to pay. They're going to pay their utility bill or their prescription bill or their grocery bill. So it's really makes me happy that I've got a great team of people here at City Utilities to work with as we talk about what this energy future looks like. And so I know there are more people here tonight that did not get to speak. So I do encourage you to put your comments in at rp@cityutilities.net so that we can hear those. We do have a couple of members of the board here tonight and a couple of members of our Citizens Advisory Council. So when we talk about your comments matter, yeah, they matter because those are people need to hear those comments. So just thank you guys all for being here online and thank you guys all for being here tonight. We really appreciate all of you.